Hi, I'm rickdior, and today we're going to start a multi-part series on Brazilian rhythms for the drum set. Now, I just finished my Afro-Cuban rhythms series, and that was 7 videos. I'm really not sure how many videos this is going to take, but it's going to take at least that many. So just like I did in that series, we're going to talk about the equipment I'm going to be using and a few different intricacies about the grooves I will be demonstrating. Now, those grooves will include samba, bossa nova, baião, frevo, afroche, marcha rancha, partido alto, and some other rhythms that I think you'll really enjoy. And again, those are all in the book. So let's get started talking about the equipment that I'll be using. We had that pork pie kit set up, and I struck that, and then I set this up this morning. This is a Doc Sweeney drum set, and I am an endorser for these drums. I started that last year, and these are about a year old, and they are made from African Olivewood, and they're Stave drums. So unlike regular ply drums or even solid shell drums, these are made like congas with several pieces of wood running vertically and glued together, kind of like a modern conga shell. Now, lots of companies make these. Most notably, Brady made some really, really great Stave drums in the 90s and 80s. And I had a kit, which was a very large kit of Brady Stave drums that I sold several years ago. Excuse me. So I really love these drums. I love using them for this kind of music when there's a lot of toms involved. If you're playing batucada samba, you're using a lot of toms, and these toms are very deep, and I'm using a very low tuning today for these drums. They have a really wide range, but the tuning I'm using is rather low, and I'll play that for you. So it's kind of an arpeggio, a triad, and that sounds good with this snare drum if it's played off. So they have a really nice tuning. Now, if you excuse me, I'm still fighting this unknown cold, and it's just trying to work itself out. So I might be a little hoarse when I'm talking through this video. So let's start out with the snare drum. And again, these are all Stave drums, every single one, even the bass drum. So Doc Sweeney made me 2 snare drums like this. They made me this 6.5 by 14, and they also made me a 5 by 14, which I'll be using on the Partido Alto video that we'll be doing, which is a funk Brazilian style. Now, one thing I love about this snare drum, it's got this really great strainer. I don't know if you can see that. I'll show you 2 angles of it. And it's got a full-on setting, and then a half-on setting, which is really cool, and then a full-off setting. Now, I use this half-on setting quite often when I'm playing Brazilian music. It really comes close to the sound of a caixa, which is a Brazilian snare drum. Those tend to be pretty cheaply made. They're metal and have a few strands of guitar wire or even curly snares. And they march with them when they play carnival. There might be 20 or 30 of them in a group. But it's a very loose sound, like this. So that's half off. All the way on sounds like this. So for no other reason, I love this snare drum for Brazilian music because I'm able to do that with it, which sounds really authentic. Now, the toms I'm using are 10 by 8, so 10-inch in diameter by 8 inches deep, 12 by 8, and 14 by 14 floor tom. For this type of music, I really like using a real floor tom. Unlike the mounted pork pie 14 by 12 I used for those other previous Afro-Cuban videos, I like this particular floor tom to be really deep and ringy. And all these toms simulate the sordo drums. There's 3 of them in the Brazilian escola or samba school, and they all need to be tuned deeply. This one the deepest. So this is only a 14. I don't know what a 16 would sound like in these drums. Would probably be pretty amazing. And this has lots and lots of depth. And again, these drums are tuned pretty low. So when I play batucada, so it's just a beautiful, full sound that I love. And again, I think that's due to the Stave shells, which are about 5/8 thick. In a lot of ways, they're similar to my Sonar phonic drums. These just ring longer. Now, the bass drum is a 20-inch in diameter by 16-inch depth, which I feel like is a really good size for playing samba. It's not too big, so it's not overwhelming, but it's got a ton of punch. Now, it also is tuned a little bit higher than you'd think. For some of the videos, especially the Porchito Alto video, I'll be tuning it a little lower because that's a funk style. But this style for samba really complements everything else. So. So it's a really pretty sound, never overbearing, and you don't want your bass drum to be overbearing this style. You don't want to play it like you're in a rock and roll band. You want to play it nice and light and let the bass player do his or her thing. So that's important. Now, cymbal-wise, I'm using mostly Paiste Traditionals, except for the hi-hats. So these hi-hats right here on my left are Sabian hand-hammered HH regular hats. They're 13 inches. And these hi-hats on my right are permanently closed. It's a set of 12-inch Sabian AA mini hats. So these are the exact same cymbals, hi-hat cymbals, that I use for the Afro-Cuban grooves. I really love these cymbals, obviously. Then the ride is a 22-inch traditional Paiste light ride. It's the only 22 they made in this series, and it's a gorgeous cymbal, as you heard in the opening. I'm also using my favorite flat ride, which is a Paiste Traditional flat ride. Again, the only flat ride they made in that series. Beautiful cymbal as well. And the crashes are a 16-inch traditional thin and a 17-inch traditional thin. So these sound like this. Now it's important that any cymbals or especially crash cymbals that you use for playing Brazilian music be very thin. So there's a quick attack and then they're out of the way. Again, the music needs to be a little on the dry side, so you don't want those cymbals, wiping out everything. So a common thing that you'll hear Brazilian drummers do is hit a cymbal with the snare drum. So when you really get aggressive like that, you don't want that cymbal building up. You almost want it to have a choke quality to it. That's why these are great, because they're so thin. And I've never broken one, and I hit pretty hard. The trick to that is playing with a glancing blow like this. And not into the cymbal like this, which is much more harsh, and then the cymbal bears the whole brunt of that stick. So you don't want to do that, and you won't break any cymbals if you do that. So in this series, we're going to be focusing on many, many rhythms, as I said earlier. And one thing you're going to want to do straight out is get the feel of this music. And the way you do that is listen, listen, listen to as many different recordings as you can. I would start by listening to music from Carnival. So every year, I'm not sure they're going to do it this year because of COVID, but in Rio, they have a samba festival, which is called Carnival. And all these samba schools, the scolas, get together and compete. And they do that every year. And they've been doing it for years and years and years. So you can go online, Spotify, or buy compilations of these sambas, and they're incredible. And a lot of times you'll have hundreds of drummers and singers and dancers. It's really something to see and hear. And when I was a young kid getting into this music, that's what I started listening to. And I would just play along with this massive percussion ensemble. And that's how I got the feel for playing samba. And then I started listening to pop Brazilian music, which was samba. So, you know, you can listen to Gilberto Gil or Caetano Veloso, all these great artists playing samba. There's lots and lots of artists. I think what I'm going to do for y'all is put a list up in the description of all these great artists that you should listen to. Hermeto Pascoal is another one I started listening to. He's a little bit eccentric, but man, what a band, and what great musicians. And then there's all kinds of Brazilian jazz. You can listen to some older Herbie Mann with Ricky Sebastian playing drums. He's fantastic. Just so many things. Even Paquito de Rivera has some Brazilian records, even though he's not Brazilian, that you can listen to. And of course, the great Portinho, the drummer who I always talk about when I'm talking about this music, he's definitely one to listen to. So I'll put a list up so you guys can kind of get into what you should be listening to for this. The main thing you'll find at first is this kind of music has a loping kind of style. So it's not straight 16ths, it's not straight triplets, it's somewhere in between. So straight 16ths, as we all know, sounds like this. And triplets, as we all know, sound like this. But we want to play in the middle of that, so So it's a very open, triplety, beautiful, organic kind of feel. And it has to be that way. It can't be stiff, it can't be tight. You got to be loose, you know, shake it out. Now, you can also play around with the feel if you could do some push-pull stuff. So in a Brazilian escola, samba school, you're going to have lots of different percussion instruments. The main ones we're concerned with are the surdo, which we talked about already. Those are the big drums. And then the caixa, the snare drum. And then the pandeiro, which is the Brazilian tambourine. That's a pretty dry instrument. It's not like a regular tambourine that rings and has the regular kind of jingles. These jingles are flat, almost like hi-hat cymbals. And it's a very dry sound, so almost like a hi-hat. So that would be our pandeiro. Then we have an instrument called the tamborim, and that's a small Brazilian drum. And what we use for that is the cross-rim click. So See there how I'm lifting that up and doing that little trick? I'm trying to recreate the sound of the tambourine. So I would suggest learning these individual instruments first. Of course, there's others like the cuica and shakers, all kinds of things. Hapanique, which is the awesome deep timbali-like drum that leads the ensemble. There's whistles, there's all kinds of great things. So when you listen, you'll hear all these sounds. Now remember, you're listening to hundreds of percussionists, so there might be 20 cachas, snare drums, there might be 50 or 60 panderos, 100 tambourines. It's just amazing. It's like a wall of sound. And you want to recreate that on the drum set. So that will be our goal with these videos, is to recreate that authentic sound. So between listening and practicing, hopefully we'll get that. So again, these will all be in my book, Advanced Coordination for Drum Set and Hand Percussion. And as usual, I'll post them on the screen. It would help if you have the book so you could follow along. So we'll just play a little batucada for you today, and then we'll start the videos soon with samba. Thanks.